The wolf was shivering. Bryn spotted him at the edge of the forest, half hidden in the shadows of the pines, his dark fur matted with snow. He was massive, larger than any wolf she had ever seen. But there was nothing threatening about him now. He lay curled against a fallen log, trembling with cold, his golden eyes watching her with something that looked almost like resignation. She should keep walking. She should hurry back to her cottage with the firewood she had gathered and forget she ever saw him. Wolves were dangerous. Everyone knew that. Even a sick or injured wolf could turn deadly in an instant. But Bryn had never been very good at walking away from suffering creatures. "Easy," she murmured, setting down her bundle of wood and approaching slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's ears flattened, but he didn't growl, didn't snap, just watched her with those strange golden eyes as she crept closer. He wasn't injured, she realized, just cold, desperately, dangerously cold. The storm last night had been brutal, the kind of storm that killed travelers caught unprepared. This wolf must have been separated from his pack, lost in the blizzard, too exhausted to find shelter. "You poor thing." Bryn crouched a few feet away, her heart aching. "You're freezing, aren't you?" The wolf made a low sound in his throat, not a growl, almost like acknowledgement. She should leave him, should go home and warm herself by her own meager fire and let nature take its course. That was what sensible people did. That was what her grandmother had always told her. "Don't interfere with wild things, girl. They'll only bring you trouble." But her grandmother had also taught her kindness, had taught her that the measure of a person's soul was how they treated those who could offer nothing in return. Bryn unfastened her cloak. It wasn't much, patched wool, threadbare in places, the best she could afford on a woodcutter's wages, but it was warm, warmer than nothing. "Here," she said softly, draping the cloak over the wolf's trembling body. "This will help." The wolf went still, his golden eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the wolf did something she didn't expect. He pressed his nose against her hand, gentle, almost grateful. "You're welcome," Bryn whispered, her eyes stinging. "Stay warm, all right? The sun will be up soon. You'll feel better then." She gathered her firewood and hurried home, shivering without her cloak, but warmer somehow in her heart. She didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen the wolf rise to his feet, the cloak still draped across his back. Might have seen him watching her until she disappeared into the trees. Might have seen the shimmer of golden light that surrounded him as the sun crested the horizon. But she didn't look back, so she didn't see any of it. The knock came at dawn. Bryn jolted awake, her heart hammering. No one knocked on her door. She lived alone at the edge of the village, in a cottage so small and poor that even the tax collectors rarely bothered with her. The only visitors she ever had were the occasional merchant buying firewood, and they never came this early. She grabbed the poker from beside the hearth and crept to the door. "Who's there?" "Someone who owes you a debt." The voice was low, rough, male, and completely unfamiliar. Bryn tightened her grip on the poker. "I don't know what you're talking about. Go away." "You gave your cloak to a wolf last night, in the forest, by the fallen log." Her blood ran cold. How could he possibly know that? She had been alone. There had been no one else in the forest, no witnesses to her foolish act of kindness. "I'm not going to hurt you," the voice continued. "I just want to return what you gave me, and to thank you." Return what she gave him? That didn't make any sense. Unless, unless he was the wolf. The thought was absurd, impossible. Wolves didn't turn into men. That was the stuff of fairy tales and fireside stories, meant to frighten children and entertain drunkards. But the stories also spoke of the Lycan kingdom to the north, of wolves who walked as men, and men who ran as wolves, of a king who had ruled for 300 years, who could tear armies apart with his bare hands, who was searching for something, someone, he had never been able to find. Bryn's hands trembled on the poker. "Step back from the door," she said. "I'm going to open it. But if you try anything, You'll hit me with your poker. I understand." There was a hint of amusement in the voice. "I promise to behave." She unlatched the door and pulled it open. The man standing on her doorstep was enormous, taller than anyone she had ever seen, with broad shoulders and a powerful build that spoke of barely contained strength. Dark hair fell in waves past his jaw, and his skin was pale, marked with scars she couldn't identify. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Golden, the exact shade of the wolf's. "You," she breathed. "Me." He held up her cloak, clean now, the patches somehow mended, the threadbare spots reinforced with fabric finer than anything she had ever owned. "You gave this to me last night. I wanted to return it. But you were a wolf." "I was." He didn't deny it, didn't try to explain it away, just stood there, holding her cloak, watching her with those impossible golden eyes. "I'm also a man, and a king, if we're being thorough about it." Bryn's knees nearly buckled. A king. Kalan, king of the northern Lycans. He inclined his head in something that might have been a bow. "At your service." She stared at him, the Lycan king, the monster from the stories, the ruler of the most powerful kingdom in the known world, standing on her doorstep, holding her patched cloak, looking at her like she was something miraculous. "I don't understand," she managed. "Why are you here? Why did you... How did you... May I come in?" He glanced at the sky, where clouds were gathering. "I suspect we're going to get more snow, and I'd rather not have this conversation while freezing." She should say no, should slam the door in his face and pretend this was all a dream. But curiosity won out over caution, and she stepped aside to let him enter. He had to duck to fit through the doorway. Once inside, he seemed to fill her entire cottage, his presence overwhelming in the small space. But he moved carefully, almost delicately, like he was afraid of breaking something. "Sit," Bryn said, gesturing to the chair by the hearth. "I'll make tea." "You don't have to." "I'm making tea." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "Just sit, please, and explain what's happening." He sat. The chair creaked ominously under his weight, but held. Bryn busied herself with the kettle, grateful for something to do with her hands. Her mind was racing. The Lycan king was in her cottage. The Lycan king had been the wolf she'd given her cloak to. The Lycan king was watching her make tea with an expression she couldn't read. "I was travelling south," he said finally, as she set the kettle over the fire. "Alone. I prefer to move without an entourage when I can. The storm caught me off guard. I shifted to wolf form to survive it. We're more resilient to cold that way. But even that wasn't enough. By the time I found shelter, I was too weak to shift back." "So you were stuck as a wolf?" "Until sunrise. The transformation is tied to certain conditions. Sunrise gave me enough strength to shift, but only barely." He paused. "If you hadn't shared your cloak with me, I might not have survived the night. Bryn turned to stare at him. You're telling me I saved the Lycan king's life by giving a wolf my cloak? That's exactly what I'm telling you. His golden eyes held hers. You had no reason to help me. You didn't know who I was. You only knew I was cold, and you gave me the only warmth you had. Do you know how rare that is? It's not rare. It's just... She struggled for words. It's just decent. Anyone would have done the same. No. His voice hardened. They wouldn't have. Most people would have kept walking. Most people would have let me freeze. You didn't. I couldn't just leave you there. Why not? The question caught her off guard. Why not? Because it would have been cruel. Because she knew what it felt like to be cold and alone with no one to help. Because her grandmother had taught her that kindness was never wasted, even when it cost you something. Because it was the right thing to do, she said finally. Something shifted in his expression. The hard lines of his face softened into something almost vulnerable. Do you know why I was traveling south? He asked. No? I was looking for something. Someone. He leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. For 300 years, I've been searching for my mate, the one person in the world who was meant to be mine. I'd given up hope of ever finding her. Bryn's heart stuttered. And then a poor girl in a threadbare cloak knelt in the snow and gave a dying wolf everything she had. He rose from the chair, crossing to her in 2 strides. And my wolf recognized her, knew her, claimed her as ours before I even knew your name. The kettle began to whistle, but neither of them moved. You're saying I'm your mate, Bryn whispered. I'm saying my wolf chose you the moment you touched me. I'm saying I felt the bond snap into place like a physical thing. I'm saying... He stopped, reaching out to cup her face with one enormous hand. I'm saying I would very much like the chance to know you, to prove myself worthy of what you gave me, to spend the rest of my very long life trying to repay a debt that can never truly be repaid. I just gave you a cloak. You gave me your cloak, the only warmth you had, in a storm that could have killed you too. His thumb traced her cheekbone. That's not nothing, Bryn. That's everything. She should pull away, should tell him this was too fast, too impossible, too much like the fairy tales she had stopped believing in years ago. But his hand was warm on her face. His golden eyes held nothing but sincerity, and something in her chest, something that had been cold and quiet for so long, was finally starting to thaw. I don't even know you, she said. Then let me fix that. He smiled, and it transformed his face, softened the hard angles, warmed the fierce golden eyes. Stay with me. Talk to me. Give me a chance to prove that what you did last night, what you gave me, wasn't a mistake. The kettle was still screaming. Bryn reached over and moved it off the fire, never breaking eye contact. One chance, she said. I'll give you one chance. Kaelin's smile widened into something fierce and joyful. That's all I ask. He stayed. Not in her cottage. That would have been improper. And despite being a king, Kaelin seemed oddly concerned with propriety. He arranged for a tent to be set up at the edge of her property, sent word to his kingdom that he would be delayed, and settled in like he had all the time in the world. Which, Bryn supposed, he did. 300 years old. What was a few weeks to someone like that? You don't have to do this, she told him on the 3rd day, watching him chop firewood with effortless ease. He had insisted on helping with her work, despite her protests that kings shouldn't be doing manual labor. Stay here, I mean. You must have responsibilities. A kingdom to run. My kingdom will survive without me for a while. He set another log on the stump and split it with a single swing. I've waited 3 centuries for you. I'm not leaving now that I've found you. But I'm nobody. I'm just a woodcutter. I don't have anything to offer a king. Kalen set down the axe and turned to face her. His golden eyes were serious. You gave me your cloak, he said, when you had nothing else, when it could have cost you your own life. That's not nothing, Bryn. That's more than most people with wealth and power have ever offered me. It was just a cloak. It was kindness. Pure, unconditional kindness. He crossed to her, stopping just out of arm's reach. Do you know how rare that is? In my world, everything comes with strings attached. Every gift demands something in return. Every act of generosity is calculated for maximum benefit. His voice roughened. You gave without expecting anything back. You gave because it was right. I've never met anyone like you. Bryn didn't know what to say. She had never thought of herself as special. She was just a poor girl trying to survive, trying to live by the values her grandmother had taught her. The idea that those values made her remarkable was difficult to process. Tell me about yourself, Kalen said, settling onto a nearby log. I want to know everything. Where you come from, how you ended up here alone, what makes you happy. There's not much to tell. She sat down across from him, pulling her newly mended cloak tighter against the cold. My parents died when I was young. My grandmother raised me until she passed 3 years ago. I've been on my own since then. No other family? None who wanted me. She shrugged, trying to make it sound like it didn't matter. I have a cousin in the village, but she made it clear I wasn't welcome in her home. I'm poor, you see, and poor relatives are an embarrassment. Something dark flickered across Kalen's face. She turned you away? After my grandmother died, yes. Said she didn't have room for charity cases. Bryn laughed, but there was no humour in it. So I stayed here. Grandmother's cottage was paid for, at least. I learned to cut and sell firewood. It's not much, but it's mine. You've been alone for 3 years? I've been alone most of my life. She met his eyes. I'm used to it. Kalen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. You don't have to be alone anymore. I told you. I'm giving you one chance. That doesn't mean... I know what it means. He held up a hand. I'm not pressuring you. I'm just telling you the truth. Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide about the mate bond, you don't have to be alone anymore. I'll make sure of it. Why? Because you showed kindness to a stranger in need. Because you've been surviving on your own for 3 years when you shouldn't have had to. Because... He stopped, struggling for words. Because the thought of you being cold and alone makes something in my chest ache. And I can't ignore that. I won't. Bryn felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. I don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is... He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. I don't know how to explain it. When a Lycan finds their mate, there's a bond, a connection. Your pain becomes my pain. Your joy becomes my joy. I can feel you, Bryn. Not your thoughts, but your emotions. And right now, I can feel how much it costs you to accept help from anyone. She stared at him. You can feel that? I can feel everything. Your fear, your hope, your stubborn determination to handle everything yourself. He smiled, soft and sad. You don't trust easily. You've been hurt too many times. But I'm asking you to try, to let me in, just a little. I promise I won't make you regret it. How can you promise that? Because I would rather die than cause you pain. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's what the mate bond means. Your well-being is more important to me than my own. Your happiness is my purpose. I know you don't believe it yet, but I'll prove it. Every day. For as long as it takes. They sat in silence for a while. The wind whispered through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. My grandmother used to tell me stories, Bryn said finally, about the Lycan king, about how he had been searching for his mate for centuries, about how he would know her by the kindness of her heart. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. Bryn smiled at the memory. She always said that kindness was the truest measure of a person, that you could tell everything you needed to know about someone by how they treated those who could offer them nothing. She was right. Kaelin leaned forward. That's why I knew. The moment you knelt in the snow and gave me your cloak, I knew. Not just because of the bond, because of who you are. A person who gives their last warmth to a stranger is a person worth loving. You don't love me. You barely know me. I know enough. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, steady. I know you're kind and brave and far too used to being alone. I know you smile when you think no one is watching and cry at night when the cottage gets too quiet. I know you deserve more than this. He gestured at her small home, her meager possessions. And I want to give it to you. What if I don't want more? What if I'm happy with what I have? Then I'll sit beside you in this cottage for the rest of your life, chopping firewood and making tea, and loving you in whatever way you'll let me. His golden eyes blazed. I don't care about wealth or status or power, Bryn. I have all of those things, and none of them have ever made me happy. You make me happy. Just being near you makes me happier than I've been in 300 years. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. She wiped at them angrily. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to let someone in. Everyone I've ever loved has left me, died, or abandoned me, or decided I wasn't worth the trouble. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't do that again. Kaelin moved closer, pulling her into his arms with infinite gentleness. She stiffened at first, but his warmth was too comforting to resist. She let herself sink into him, let herself be held. I'm not going anywhere, he murmured against her hair. I can't promise I'll never die. No one can promise that. But I can promise that as long as I live, I will be here. I will choose you. Every day, every moment, I will choose you. How can you be so certain? Because I've waited 300 years for you. He pulled back to look at her face, wiping her tears with gentle fingers. Do you think I would throw that away? Do you think I would find my mate after all this time and then leave her? I would burn the world before I let anything separate us. She laughed, a wet, broken sound. That's dramatic. I'm a very dramatic person. He smiled. You'll get used to it. Something loosened in her chest. Some knot of fear and grief that had been there so long she had forgotten it existed. It didn't disappear entirely. She wasn't sure it ever would, but it eased, just a little. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay, I'll try. I'll let you in. She met his eyes. But if you hurt me, I won't. If you leave, I won't. If you... He kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when she didn't pull away, he deepened it, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were blazing gold. I love you, he said. I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready to say it back. But I need you to know. I love you, Bryn, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it. She couldn't say it back. Not yet. The words stuck in her throat, trapped behind years of walls she had built to protect herself. But she kissed him again, and she hoped that was enough. For now, it would have to be. The weeks turned into a month, and Bryn found herself changing. It happened slowly. So slowly she barely noticed at first. She stopped bracing for disappointment every time Kaelan smiled at her, stopped waiting for him to leave, to realize she wasn't worth the trouble, to disappear the way everyone else had. He was still there every morning, still chopping wood and making tea, and looking at her like she had hung the moon. And somewhere along the way, she started to believe he might actually stay. "Come with me?" he said one evening as they sat by the fire in her cottage. The winter had deepened, snow piling up around the windows, but inside it was warm, safe. "Come to my kingdom. See my home. Let me show you what your life could be." Bryn's heart stuttered. "Leave here?" "Just for a visit, to see if you like it, to meet my people, explore the castle, decide if it's somewhere you could be happy." He took her hand. "I won't force you to stay. If you hate it, if you want to come back here, I'll bring you home myself. I just—" He paused, searching for words. "I want to share my world with you. All of it. Not just the parts that fit in this cottage." She looked around at the small room that had been her entire existence for 3 years. The worn furniture, the patched curtains, the fire that never quite kept out the cold. She had been happy here, in her way. Content, at least. It was safe. And safe had been enough. But Kaelan was offering her more. A kingdom. A future. A life she had never dared to imagine. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll come with you." His face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. The journey north took a week. Kaelan had sent for a carriage, a proper one, with cushioned seats and thick blankets, and a small stove that kept the interior warm even as they climbed into the mountains. Bryn spent most of the trip with her face pressed to the window, watching the landscape change from familiar forests to soaring peaks she had only seen in paintings. "It's beautiful," she breathed as they crested a pass and the northern kingdom spread out before them. A castle built into the side of a mountain, its towers reaching toward the sky. A city sprawling below, smoke rising from 1,000 chimneys. And everywhere, wolves, running through the snow, playing in the streets, lounging on rooftops in the pale winter sun. "It's home," Kaelan said, watching her with a soft smile. "Or it could be, if you want it." The castle was even more impressive up close. Stone walls that seemed to grow from the mountain itself. Tapestries and paintings and fires blazing in every hearth. Servants who bowed as they passed, eyes widening when they saw the woman on their king's arm. "They're staring," Bryn whispered, suddenly conscious of her plain dress and travel-worn appearance. "They're curious. Word has spread that I found my mate." Kaelan squeezed her hand. "They've been waiting for this moment for 300 years. They're excited." "Excited about me? About us? About the possibility of a queen? About their king finally being happy?" He stopped in the middle of the great hall and turned to face her. "You don't see yourself clearly, Bryn. You think you're ordinary, unremarkable, nothing special. But to them, to me, you're a miracle." She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways she was wrong for this place, this role, this life. But the servants were smiling at her. The guards were nodding with respect, and Kaelin was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Maybe, she thought, it was time to stop arguing. The rooms he gave her were connected to his own, a suite of chambers with a sitting room between them. The bed was enormous, piled with furs in colours she had never seen. The windows looked out over the city, and in the distance she could see wolves running through the snow. "These are mine?" she asked, still trying to process the sheer size of the space. Her entire cottage could have fit in this room 3 times over. "These are yours, for as long as you want them." Kaelin leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore. "There's no pressure, Bryn. If you need time alone, this is your space. I won't enter without permission. I won't expect anything you're not ready to give." "Why are you so patient with me?" "Because you're worth being patient for." He crossed to her, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Because I've waited 3 centuries, and I can wait longer if that's what you need. Because rushing you would only push you away, and I can't—" His voice roughened. "I can't lose you. Not now that I've found you." Bryn closed the distance between them and pressed her hand to his chest. His heart pounded beneath her palm. Strong, steady, devoted. "I don't want you to wait any more," she said quietly. His breath caught. "Bryn, I'm scared. I'm terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of losing this than I am of getting hurt." She looked up at him, her heart in her throat. "I love you, Kaelin. I think I've loved you since you showed up at my door holding my cloak like it was something precious. I was just too afraid to admit it." "Say it again." His voice was hoarse. "I love you. Again, I love you." She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. I love you. I love you. Is that enough times, or should I—" He kissed her before she could finish. This kiss was different from the others. There was nothing tentative about it, nothing restrained. It was 300 years of loneliness finally finding its end. It was the shattering of every wall she had built around her heart. It was surrender and victory, and the beginning of everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, his eyes were blazing gold. "Mine," he growled. "Tell me you're mine." "Yours," she breathed. "I'm yours." He lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing at all and carried her to the bed. Later, much later, Bryn lay tangled in sheets that cost more than her cottage, her head resting on Kaelin's chest, listening to the steady drum of his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, and she felt more at peace than she had in years, maybe ever. "I never thought I could have this," she admitted quietly. "A home, a family, someone who loved me and stayed." "You have all of it now." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You'll never be alone again. I promise." "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I keep every promise I make." He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. "You are my mate, my queen, my heart. Nothing in this world will ever change that." She believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed that someone would stay, that she was worth staying for, that love didn't always have to end in loss. "I want to marry you," she said. Kaelin went still beneath her. "What?" "I want to marry you. I want to be your queen. I want—" She stopped, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you don't want—" "I have wanted nothing else for 300 years." He pulled her up and kissed her fiercely. "Yes. 1,000 times yes. We'll marry whenever you want, wherever you want, however you want." Just tell me and it's done. She laughed against his mouth. I don't care about the details. I just want to be yours, officially, permanently. You already are. He pressed his forehead to hers. But if you want the ceremony, the crown, the title, I'll give you all of it. I'll give you everything, Bryn. Every single thing you've ever wanted, and 1,000 things you haven't even thought to want yet. I only want you. You have me. His arms tightened around her. Forever. You have me forever. Outside, the wolves howled at the moon. Inside, wrapped in the arms of a king who loved her, Bryn finally understood what it meant to come home. Not a place, not a building, a person. The right person. She had found hers, and she was never letting go. The trouble came 2 weeks before the wedding. Bryn was in the castle gardens, overseeing the planting of the winter roses she had requested for the ceremony, when a servant came running. My lady. The girl was breathless, her face pale. There are visitors at the gate. They say they're your family. Bryn's blood ran cold. She had no family, not anymore. Her parents were dead. Her grandmother was dead. The only relative she had left was... My cousin, she whispered. Yes, my lady. A woman named Margot. And her husband. They're demanding to see you. Demanding? Of course they were. Margot had never asked for anything in her life. She took what she wanted and discarded what she didn't. And Bryn had been firmly in the discard category for 3 years. Until now. Until word had spread that the poor woodcutter at the edge of the village was about to become queen of the Northern Kingdom. I'll handle this, Bryn said, her voice steadier than she felt. Where is the king? In the council chamber, my lady. Do you want me to fetch him? No. She straightened her spine. I'll deal with this myself. She found them in the great hall, surrounded by guards who watched with barely concealed suspicion. Margot looked exactly as Bryn remembered. Beautiful, polished, dressed in fine clothes that suggested wealth she didn't actually have. Her husband, Aldous, stood beside her, his expression calculating. Bryn! Margot rushed forward, arms outstretched. Oh, my dear cousin, I've been so worried about you. Bryn stepped back before Margot could embrace her. Worried? Is that what you call it? Margot's smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean you haven't spoken to me in 3 years. I mean you turned me away when grandmother died, told me you didn't have room for charity cases. I mean you've made it very clear that I was nothing to you. She kept her voice calm, controlled. And now here you are, suddenly worried. What changed, Margot? I don't know what you're talking about. We've always been close. Haven't we, Aldous? Very close, Aldous agreed, his tone oily. Family is so important. Family? Bryn laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You didn't consider me family when I was starving. You didn't consider me family when I was alone. You only consider me family now that I'm about to be queen. We're not here for... Margot sputtered, her composure cracking. You're here for money, for status, for whatever scraps you can convince me to throw your way. Bryn took a step forward, and to her satisfaction, Margot flinched. Let me be very clear. I am not the girl you threw away 3 years ago. I am not desperate, and I am not grateful for any attention you deign to give me. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Bryn. Aldous stepped forward, his smile hardening. Perhaps you're being hasty. We're family. Surely that counts for something. And I'm sure the king would want you to maintain good relations with your relatives. The king, a voice rumbled from behind them, wants nothing of the sort. Kalen strode into the hall, his golden eyes blazing with fury. He must have been alerted by one of the servants, despite Bryn's instructions. He positioned himself at her side, his presence a wall of barely contained violence. Your Majesty. Margot dropped into a curtsy, her face going pale. You were just leaving. Kalen's voice was ice. I know exactly who you are and what you did. Bryn has told me everything. How you turned her away when she had nowhere else to go. How you called her a charity case. How you left her alone to starve while you lived in comfort. There was a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. He took a step forward, and both Margot and Aldous stumbled back. You abandoned her. You treated her as worthless. And now you come crawling back because you see an opportunity to profit from her success. We just wanted to reconcile, Aldous tried. To mend the family bond? There is no bond to mend. Bryn stepped forward, standing beside Kalen. You severed it when you closed your door in my face. You killed it when you called me a burden. Whatever we were to each other died the day grandmother did. Margot's expression twisted. The mask of pleasantness fell away, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You ungrateful wretch, she hissed. I should have known you would turn out like this. Just like your mother. Common, grasping, forgetting where you came from. My mother was the kindest person I ever knew. If I'm like her, I consider that a compliment. Your mother was a fool who married beneath her and died in poverty. Just like you would have, if this king hadn't… Enough. Kalen's voice cracked like thunder. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. You will not speak to my mate that way. You will not speak of her mother that way. You will turn around, walk out of my castle, and never return. If I ever see either of you again, if you ever attempt to contact Bryn again, I will have you arrested and thrown in the deepest dungeon I can find. Do you understand? Margot had gone white as snow. Aldous looked like he might be sick. Do you understand? Kalen repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Yes, Your Majesty, Margot whispered. Then go, now. They fled. Guards escorted them out, and Bryn watched until they disappeared through the castle gates. Only when they were truly gone did she let out the breath she had been holding. I'm sorry. Kalen turned to her, his expression softening. I know you wanted to handle it yourself, but when I heard what she was saying to you, don't apologize. Bryn took his hand. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you were here. How do you feel? She considered the question. How did she feel? For 3 years, she had wondered if Margot had been right. If she really was a burden, a charity case, someone unworthy of love or belonging. She had carried that wound in her heart like a splinter, festering quietly. But watching Margot flee, hearing Kalen defend her, standing in this castle that would soon be her home, the wound felt cleaner somehow, smaller, like it might actually heal. I feel free, she said finally. I feel like I finally closed a door that's been open for too long. She can't hurt you anymore. I know. She squeezed his hand. I think I've known for a while. I was just afraid to believe it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. You never have to be afraid again. Not of her. Not of anyone. I will protect you with everything I have. I know you will. She pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. That's why I love you. Say it again. She laughed. A real laugh, light and free. I love you, Kaelin. I love you. I love you. I love you. I will never get tired of hearing that. He pulled back to look at her face. Are you still sure about the wedding? More sure than ever. She rose on her tiptoes to kiss him. I want to be your wife. I want to be your queen. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that Margot was wrong about everything. She was. He kissed her back, soft and reverent. You are worth more than she could ever understand. And I will remind you of that every single day. They stood in the great hall, holding each other, while the last echoes of Bryn's past faded into nothing. And when she finally lifted her head, she found she was smiling. The door was closed. The wound was healing. And the future, her future, had never looked brighter. The wedding was held on the longest night of the year. Bryn stood before a mirror in the Queen's chambers, watching as attendants fussed with her gown, white silk embroidered with silver wolves and winter roses, a train that pooled behind her like freshly fallen snow. Her hair had been woven with tiny crystals that caught the candlelight, and a crown of silver and diamonds rested on her head. She looked like a queen. She felt like one too. You're stunning. She turned to find Kaelin in the doorway, resplendent in black and silver, his golden eyes blazing with love. He looked at her the way he always did, like she was the most precious thing in the world, like he still couldn't believe she was real. You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony, she said, but she was smiling. I've never been good at following rules. He crossed the room and took her hands in his, especially not when my mate is involved. 3 months. It had been 3 months since she had knelt in the snow and given her cloak to a dying wolf. 3 months since her entire life had changed. She had transformed in that time, not just in circumstance, but in spirit. The fearful girl who expected abandonment had become a woman who trusted in love. The lonely woodcutter had become a queen, beloved by an entire kingdom. Are you ready? He asked. I've been ready since the moment I decided to share my cloak with a stranger. She squeezed his hands. I just didn't know it yet. The ceremony was held in the great hall, transformed for the occasion into a wonderland of white candles and silver ribbons. The entire kingdom had turned out to celebrate. Nobles and common folk, Lycans in human form, and wolves padding silently through the crowd, all gathered to witness their king finally take a queen. Bryn walked down the aisle on steady legs, her eyes fixed on Kaelin's face. He watched her approach with an expression of such naked devotion that her heart ached with it. 300 years of loneliness, finally ending. 3 years of isolation, finally healed. 2 souls who had been wandering alone, finally finding each other. The vows were ancient, spoken in the old tongue of the Lycan people. But when the formal words were done, Kaelin added his own. I take you as my wife, my mate, my queen, he said, his voice ringing through the hall. I vow to protect you, to honor you, to cherish you in all things. But more than that, his voice roughened with emotion, I vow to spend every day of my eternal life repaying the debt you gave me that night in the forest. You shared your cloak with a stranger. You gave your warmth to a wolf who had nothing to offer you in return. That act of kindness saved my life and changed my soul. I will never forget it. I will never stop being grateful for it. Bryn's eyes burned with tears, but she didn't look away. I take you as my husband, my mate, my king, she replied. I vow to stand beside you, to support you, to love you with everything I am. 3 months ago, I was alone in a forest, watching a wolf shiver in the cold. I gave him my cloak because it was the right thing to do, because my grandmother taught me that kindness is never wasted. She paused, steadying herself. I didn't know I was saving a king. I didn't know I was meeting my future husband. I just knew that I couldn't walk away from someone in need. And that choice led me here, to you, to this life I never dared to imagine. I will spend the rest of my days being grateful that I listened to my heart instead of my fear. The rest of your days, he murmured, and then some. He kissed her, deep, thorough, claiming, and the hall erupted in cheers. The feast that followed was magnificent, but Bryn barely noticed the food or the wine. She was too focused on Caelan, on the warmth of his hand in hers, on the way he looked at her like she was the center of his universe. At some point during the celebration, she slipped away to the balcony, needing a moment alone with the stars. The night was cold, but she didn't mind. She had grown to love the cold. It reminded her of that night in the forest, when everything had changed. There you are. She turned to find Caelan stepping onto the balcony, a familiar bundle of fabric in his hands. I have something for you, he said. A wedding gift. He held out her cloak. Her old cloak. The patched, threadbare one she had draped over a dying wolf 3 months ago. But it had been transformed. The patches were still there, but they had been embroidered over with intricate silver thread, turning imperfections into art. The worn spots had been reinforced with silk, and along the hem someone had stitched a line of tiny wolves running through a forest of silver trees. Caelan, she breathed. I wanted to preserve it, he said. This cloak saved my life. It brought us together. I thought it deserved to be honored, not replaced. She ran her fingers over the embroidery, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. He draped the cloak over her shoulders, and it settled around her like an embrace. I know you have finer things now, silks and velvets and furs worth a fortune. But I hoped, you might want to keep this, as a reminder of who you were before, of who you still are, underneath the crown. A poor girl who shared her cloak with a wolf. A kind girl, a brave girl, a girl who saw something in need and couldn't walk away. He cupped her face in his hands. That's who you are, Bryn. That's who you'll always be. And I love you for it. She kissed him, soft and sweet, with all the love she had been afraid to feel for so long. I love you too, she whispered against his lips, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. Then we're perfectly matched, he smiled. Because I feel exactly the same way. They stood on the balcony, wrapped in each other and the old patched cloak, watching the stars wheel overhead. Later that night, in the privacy of their chambers, Caelan held her close and whispered promises against her skin. He told her she was beautiful, told her she was brave, told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him in 300 years of living. Bryn fell asleep in his arms, wrapped in warmth and love, and a happiness she had never dared to imagine. She dreamed of wolves and winter forests and cloaks that saved lives. 1 year later, Bryn stood on that same balcony, watching the first snow of winter drift down over the mountains. In her arms, a newborn son slept peacefully, dark hair like his mother, golden eyes like his father. Caelan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around them both. You're brooding, he said. I'm reflecting. There's a difference. And what are you reflecting on? She leaned back into his warmth, feeling their sun stir against her chest. I was thinking about grandmother, about what she would say if she could see me now. What do you think she would say? Bryn smiled, remembering her grandmother's weathered face, her wise eyes, her gentle voice speaking of kindness and courage and the importance of helping those in need. She would say that kindness is never wasted, that what we give always comes back to us, one way or another. She looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face. She would say that I finally got the happy ending she always wanted for me. And has she been right? About all of it? About everything. Bryn turned in his arms, careful not to wake the baby. I gave a stranger my cloak, and in return, I got a husband, a kingdom, a family. I got everything I never dared to hope for. You got what you deserved. Kaelin kissed her forehead. You always deserved this, Bryn. You just needed someone to show you. You showed me. You showed yourself. I just gave you the opportunity. She laughed softly. We can argue about that forever. We have forever. His arms tightened around her. That's the nice thing about being mated to an immortal king. They named their son Rowan, after the tree that grew outside her grandmother's cottage. The tree Bryn used to climb as a child, dreaming of adventures she never thought she would have. She watched him grow, watched him take his first steps, say his first words, shift into a wolf for the first time, and run howling through the snow. She watched Kaelin teach him to hunt, to lead, to be kind to those weaker than himself. And she never forgot where she came from, never forgot the lonely cottage at the edge of the village, the threadbare cloak, the wolf shivering in the snow. She made sure her son knew the stories, knew that his mother had been poor and alone, that she had been saved by an act of simple kindness, that the measure of a person's worth was not in what they possessed, but in what they gave. Always help those in need, she told him, the same words her grandmother had told her. Even when it costs you something, even when you get nothing in return, because kindness is never wasted. It always comes back to you, one way or another. And she knew, watching her son nod solemnly, watching Kaelin smile with pride, feeling the weight of the crown on her head and the patched cloak around her shoulders, that her grandmother had been right all along. She had shared her cloak with a wolf, and she had gotten the whole world in return.